Yes, I think we are good to start. Roshni, you can start.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Good evening to one and all present here, and a warm welcome to this 3-day national workshop on honing life skills for professional and personal success, organized by the IQAC and the Department of English of H.R. College of Commerce and Economics, in the collaboration with the IQAC and the Department of Business Communication of SIWS and Swami College. My name is Roshni Pasi, and I will be the hosting this evening. Our topic for today is the right way to write, writing and an important life skill. Our speaker for this evening is Miss Santhini Govindan. Before we move ahead, I request everyone to please switch on their camera for the group picture.
I guess we are done.
Yes, okay, ma'am. Thank you, everyone. I would now like to, one second now. Thank you, everyone. I would now like to invite our teacher in charge, Dr. 𝐾𝐤𝙗𝙗, ma'am, to outline the objective of this workshop.
Thank you, Roshni. Firstly, I'll brief the participants about what we did yesterday. Today is the second day of the 3-day workshop. Yesterday, we had the speaker for yesterday was Mr. Chetan Bhagat, a younger brother of the famous novelist, Mr. Chetan Bhagat. And it was a very insightful session that he conducted. And he also interspersed it with many thought-provoking exercises, which he consolidated at the end of the workshop. There were 4 major points which he brought which he brought to our notice. They were: there is no logic, and there's only magic. There's no formula in life. Enemy, war, and results, all unexpected, and we have to constantly be, on the watch for these things in our life. And lastly, everything is temporary. It was a wonderful talk where students interacted with him, and I'm sure they gained a lot. We generally push our students to lead lives in a very stressful manner, but his talk was a great stress buster, according to me. And I think that is the way we need to approach our lives. That's the right way to approach our lives, where we do our bit and leave the rest to things. Everything is not in our control. So that is my takeaway from his talk. Now, moving on to today, the second day of the workshop, we have Miss Santhini Govindan, who will be speaking on the right way to write, writing an important life skill. And it's my honor to introduce her and welcome her to the workshop today. Now, talking briefly about Miss Santhini Govindan, she's a freelance writer and an award-winning creator of original children's literature and content for English language and academic textbooks. She was language editorial consultant for children's division, the Malayalam Manorama Kerala, from April 2003 to April 2019, that is for 16 years. She received a 2-year Lok Sabha fellowship from the Speakers Research Initiative, Parliament of India in October 2018 to undertake a research project on the subject, how to reach out to children, particularly adolescents, new youth, to educate them about the role and function of Parliament. She has won several national and international awards. And I would just like to touch upon the most, the highlights. She was awarded a senior fellowship in literature for a period of 2 years from February 2002 to 2004 by the Department of Culture, Ministry of Tourism and Culture, Government of India. And a project for this fellowship was Children's Literature in English in India, its Growth and Development. She has been invited to meet the author sessions, and she has conducted poetry readings and creative writing workshops at several established and renowned schools and institutions in Mumbai. To name a few, the British Council, Arya Vidya Mandir Juhu, Arya Vidya Mandir Santa Cruz, Singhania School at Thane, St. Anthony's Girls School at Chembur, St. Mary's ICSE School in Navi Mumbai. She's also spoken on how the story unfolds at the 𝐒𝐚𝐧𝐿, Ghatkopar. Along with this, she has compiled the parent and teacher guide for the highlights, which is titled Highlights Primary Education Foundation Program, and it is sold in India by Lotus Learning Private Limited. Now, these are a set of educational books and CDs for children in the primary school classes. She has compiled a parent and teacher guide for getting ready for school program. And lastly, she was the main resource person and conducted a workshop on creative writing for children, Write and Read, at Bandra, Mumbai. There were more than 200 participants aged between 7 to 15 years. Also, she has won awards at the Sahitya Academy, given by the Sahitya Academy Foundation of India. And the list is endless. I warmly welcome you, ma'am, to the session today, and we are all ears. Over to you, Santhini, ma'am.
Thank you so much. First of all, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
So thank you so much for that kind words and the nice introduction. And thank you for inviting me for this workshop conducted by 2 separate universities. When I was a student, these kind of workshops were unknown. In our time, academia was just, we used to go to college, bunk college sometimes, which is still not changed. But we had exams, everything boiled down to what you did on that one day, 𝑚𝑜𝑟𝑒 if you fell sick on that day. And then the marks that you got sort of decided the course of the rest of your life. Now, I think it is so enlightening for the students to understand that examinations and studying a subject is just one part of your life. Your career may be in a totally different subject from what you are studying. So it is very important to build life skills, which will probably stand you in better stead than even the subject that you are learning today. So you heard a little about my career path. I've been most successful in writing for children, but my work is studied all across the world, mostly in Southeast Asia and in the Middle East, some parts of it in the United States, in some universities. And I also have written research projects for newspapers and for academic institutions. Pretty much and short stories for adults. So pretty much my whole life revolves around reading and writing. So I honestly believe that writing is a very important skill for everyone. Whenever I take a workshop, some of the parents tell me, but I have a business and we have lots of, customers, and I don't want my child to be a poet or a writer. So my answer to this is, no matter what your profession is, you have to be a good communicator. Writing is about communicating. You have to tell your story and you have to sell yourself well through your own words. It's like cooking. I always tell people, every man, woman, and young boy or girl needs to cook because it's a survival skill. You should not depend on others to get your food for you. You should be able to make a simple meal for yourself. So also learn how to write. You don't have to write a bestseller, but you should write logically, coherently, intelligently. so that people can understand what you are trying to say and you can sell your story, your ideas to them. There is an app called Practo where you can see reviews of all the doctors. And when you are looking for a doctor, you go to Practo. And if you go to Practo, you will see there is very little about the actual medical skills, but there are lots of comments on how the doctor interacts with the patients, how he talks to them. He is rude, he is kind, he is polite. It's all about communication. So writing is, it's not that you're going to become a poet or a writer. You may become one, but it's about how you present your story. In fact, the story of the world is all in words. The written word, everyone thought when the internet came that books would go out of fashion, but actually the written word has now assumed many more forms than before. When I was a girl, there were only books, there were newspapers, there were magazines, there were movies. Now there is the internet, there is Twitter, there are podcasts, there is WhatsApp, there is Instagram. And yesterday I read, I don't know if any of you, that there's a new thing called Substack, which is, and I believe Salman Rushdie has just subscribed to it, and he is going to publish his book through Substack, which is it is a email-like letter by subscription, and the book is going to go out in installments. So every day there are new ways in which the written word is evolving. So you have to be a master of the written word. Yesterday, I also listened in to the talk by Mr. Ketan Bhagat, and he said that, as Kirti has just mentioned, there is no logic in life. The people whom you think are going to be your enemies may not be so. You are cruising on the road when suddenly there will be a turn and you may fall into a ravine. So my addition to this is, through your entire life, you may not, your parents will eventually go, your wife or your husband may also move away, your children will grow up. Your main companion is going to be your own mind, who you are. Your mind is made up of your words. Yesterday, during the course of the lecture, I heard one girl, I forget the name, had said, but what if you get dementia? And I want to tell you, you are a bit young, I guess you are 20 something, to worry about dementia. But do you know that those who read and write are unlikely to get dementia? The mind is just, the brain is an organ, just like any other organ. It has to be nourished. If we lie in bed for 6 months without walking, the muscles are going to be atrophied. So also the brain. If you do not exercise it, you are going to get dementia. So if you don't want dementia, I mean, I don't think that dementia is around the corner for any of you. Maybe 50 years down the line, you need to worry. But to keep your mind sharp, scientifically, it has been proven that every time you write, it is a fresh start. For today's seminar, it was a fresh start for me, even though I've done it hundreds of times. I had to see who are the people who are listening, what are the things that would engage them, what are the things that I have to talk about writing that you can take away from it. So this is one of the things that has writing, the greatest qualification of writing is that it keeps you young and it keeps you sharp. And now you need it for all kinds of communication. Everybody has a Twitter account, an Instagram account, a Facebook account. So it's all on words. In fact, Instagram is only on hashtags. And you have to use the hashtags judiciously. They are just words. The better the hashtags are, the wider the audience. So reading and writing is of paramount importance. Writing is your window to the world and the way that you project your story. So even if you are not going to make writing a career, you need to be a good writer. If you are going to a foreign university, first of all, you have to write a SOP, statement of purpose, which is an essay. That is, you cannot, there are people who will write it for you, but they are able to sniff it out a mile away. So you have to explain your story. Once you get into a job, you have to make PowerPoint presentations, you have to send emails. Your communication is paramount. One of my children is in the United States. He's a techie, and he told me that, so when he was young, I used to persuade them to read. And so there was a lot of reading and communication. And then he did tell me that most of his people who compete with him are Chinese and Koreans. And he said, they are very good technically, as good as I am. But my English, thanks to you, is where I score. Because when you're trying to communicate your ideas to an audience which is very cosmopolitan, you have to have good, coherent skills in communication. So these are some of the reasons why you should be a good writer. You can also be, writing is a profession that has no age. You can be a tennis player only maybe till you are 35, unless you are Leander Pace, which then you can push yourself to 40. But after some time, your knees and your elbows and your joints are going to give way. You can be a fighter pilot till your eyes are in perfect condition. You can be a dancer, but the writing is a skill. It's like wine. It becomes better as it ages. So Khushwant Singh was 99. He died at 99. He stopped writing 3 weeks before he died. So Toni Morrison wrote a book when she was 84. Daniel Defoe wrote Robinson Crusoe when he was 60 years old. And our own Ruskin Bond, I think all of you have heard of Ruskin Bond. He's 86, going to 87, still going strong. So you can be a writer. All of you must be 20 something. Look at this as a second career that will go on for more than half a century. You can also be a writer along with another career. In fact, I would advise that. Writing, it's difficult to make money to sustain yourself unless you have another day job. But many of the most world successful writers had other careers. Like you must have all heard of 𝑗𝑟𝑒𝑙. He was a zoologist and a naturalist, but he wrote 40 books. Most of them were about adventures of, when he went collecting animal samples and about his own family. James Herriot was a veterinary doctor who had a veterinarian practice, but he also has sold 50 million books based on the adventures that he had as a veterinarian. So you can be a writer and do something else. Madhur Jaffrey is an actress, but she was also a food writer. So it doesn't matter whether you have another career. In fact, writing is a career that opens windows to the world, and you get to meet a lot of people, and you spread your reach much further if you are a writer. So all of you, I know many of you, and one of the things I want to tell you is when I was a young girl, there was no Google, there was no internet. Nobody wanted to be a software engineer because it didn't exist. Some of you are going to join professions which probably do not even exist today, which are going to evolve in the future. But for every profession, you need to communicate well. So writing is a skill that is not going to be wasted. It is always going to help you to enhance your the person who you are and the way you tell your story. One of the important things about writing is that it is a catharsis. Catharsis, the word catharsis is from the Greek word, which means to purge yourself. Writing is a great way to cleanse your emotions. Now I'm going to give you a small example. In 2015, the newspapers were full of sensational case of Indrani Mukherjee. I think you must all be remembering. She was accused of an unspeakable crime. And for days, the newspapers and the TV were full of nothing else except Indrani Mukherjee and what she had done. Indrani Mukherjee had a 18-year-old daughter, Vidhi Mukherjee, and she has written a book. It's called The Devil's Daughter. On her 18th birthday, she said she was just like all young people, waiting to come home, have a nice party, enjoy the day with her friends to celebrate a milestone. Her house was full of police. And she came to know that her mother had was accused of committing a crime, and her mother was arrested and taken away. And 4 months later, her father was accused of being complicit in the crime and was also taken away. So she has written in the book that I was hanging on to a cliff with just 2 fingers. And the book, and she said, you know, the world is very cruel. We are very judgmental. They called her the devil's daughter because she was the daughter of someone who was accused of a crime. And she said it was the book, which has now been released. It's about, I think, a month, by Westland. It is, she said, it is my journey to hell, but not yet back. So this is her story. I think it is something which everyone should read. It is really catharsis in the true sense of the word. And for every, Westland is marketing the book as self-help, so that others who go through terrible situations like this, she had not asked for this, like what Mr. Bhagat said. This was something that just happened. You are just thrown under a road roller. But because of the capacity of her mind, she was able to extract something from that. She wrote a book. It is now becoming a bestseller. From a car crash, you can say, she has taken out something. She has been hailed now as a literary talent. So this is an example of what words and writing can do. She was in a terrible state. You can imagine, 18 years old, both the parents, and more than anything else, you don't even have the chance to grieve or to mourn in private, because the paparazzi is behind everything that you do, taking photographs at every single turn. That's because we have such an invasive society. But from all this, she was able to write this book. And she was able to turn her situation and find something which will be of use to others. This is not for everybody, of course. Everybody would not be able to bear their soul and would have, but even so, it teaches you what writing can bring for you. If you don't want to reveal your secrets in the way that she has done, you can write under a pen name. Like, I don't know, many of you know, Agatha Christie was not really, her name was not Agatha Christie. George Eliot was not George Eliot. They all wrote under a pen name. Or if you don't want to do that as well, you can write a fictional novel and you can bring in whatever it is that has caused you anxiety and pain, so that you will be purged of that. When The God of Small Things was released, Arundhati Roy's book, her mother said her mother was married to a Bengali and they parted ways early. Arundhati was only 5 years old and they went back to their family home in Kerala. And the mother said, I tried to keep her away from all the unpleasantness and the family bickering and the disputes. And I thought that I was very successful. But when I read 2 decades later what she had written, I realized she had understood and internalized everything that was going on. So writing, every writer, we bring a little of ourselves into our writing. If you are feeling upset, depressed, anxious about something, the best way to get rid of all those feelings is to write about it. If you don't want to reveal your identity, you do not have to. But once you let it out and you get reactions from people, you feel a lot better. So this is these are some of the advantages and benefits that you can get of writing. Now, what are the different ways? Now, many people say, but what will I write? I have no ideas. Okay, now you have sold me that maybe it's a good idea that. So there are very many different genres to write. There is humor writing. There are plays. You can write folk stories. If you are good in a vernacular language, you can translate a story from your own vernacular language into English language. You can write poetry. You can write graphic novels if you are good at illustration. You can write, there are people like William Dalrymple who specializes in writing historical novels. So he takes a particular period, a lot of research, and brings history to life. So it depends. You can write on travel, you can write on food, write on nature, whatever you are interested in. Like Rashmi Uday Singh, she was an income tax officer. She left and she became a food writer. So she reviews restaurants and she reviews food. And Madhur Jaffrey, I've already talked about. Then there is a food historian who looks at the history of food. So there are very many different ways that you can write about, things that you can write about. Where do you find ideas? This is one of the questions that many people ask me. Like, when you are a writer, where do you find ideas? So Agatha Christie had said the best time to plan a book is when you are doing the dishes. So most of you might have, when you were children, you might have read Roald Dahl. Have any of you read Roald Dahl? Was he a favorite of any of the people who are listening in?
Yes, ma'am. Like, I feel most of us have read Roald Dahl when we were small, like from the BFG to. When
Roald Dahl was, I mean, he used to keep a notebook and all the ideas that he had. So there's one very famous book of his called Big BFG, A Big Fat Giant. You might have read it. So he had written one line in a notebook when he was a schoolboy, and he wrote the book when he was 66 years. So he kept the notebook and the idea, it was slow cooking in his brain for 50 years. He would write for 4 hours every day, and he would write only with a pencil. So all writers have their own eccentricities. But Richard Branson, I know you have all heard of Richard Branson. He always goes about with a notebook because he says that I am a student of life. And there is a scientific theory that we keep an idea in our mind only for 3 seconds. Everything is so fleeting. So many times ideas come into our mind and they go away and we can't remember them. So keep a notebook so that you can note down all your ideas. Charles Dickens, he was an insomniac. He could not sleep. So at night, he would roam the streets of London when they were deserted with his notebook. And he would look at, and you know, at the night in London, the kind of people that were there were only the pickpockets and the ruffians and the gangsters. But he would take notes about what he saw, and all those characters would come into his book. So one of the ways to get ideas is to keep a notebook. Words are very important because they define us also. For example, one of the things that I have found is the words that we use when we are uncomplimentary words. Like one of the words that people said is, oh, you are a retard. Now that is not a very kind thing to say. And I think it shows how we look at the differently abled people. Remember, words are very powerful tools and they are weapons. So the words that we use define who we are. So when you start writing, you have to be careful about what you write. Use the words which will project the image that you would like to be portrayed. Right then, now I'm going to talk about one very important thing which I have noticed. I'm often called to judge competitions and poetry competitions and writing competitions. And I found there is a lot of plagiarism. I think you all know what plagiarism is. It's very easy to plagiarize in the modern world. When I was a student, it was not so easy because we didn't have any internet. Now, all you have to do is open your browser and cut, copy, paste. And then you're done. And you think that nobody is going to find out. And you think that everything on the internet, because it is available, is free for all. So I just want to make you understand that it is not. Especially those who are planning to go to a foreign university, or if you want to work in a foreign country, you have to be very aware of what is plagiarism. Plagiarism is actually equivalent to, if you wouldn't walk into somebody's house and pick up something and say that it is for me. No, you wouldn't. So same way, you would not take somebody else's ideas. There are certain conditions where you can use somebody else's ideas, but you have to give them credit. You have to use the quotations properly, and you have to give them credit. There is something called mosaic plagiarism also, which is accidental plagiarism, which is you are not aware that you are using somebody else's work. Be very careful when you are taking work that belongs to somebody else, because you will get into trouble. In 2006, in the United States, in Harvard University, there was an Indian girl called 𝐿𝙚𝙗𝙗 𝐿𝙚𝙗𝑉𝑖𝑠𝑤𝑎𝑛athan. I don't know if any of you have heard about this case. She wrote a book about Opal Mehta got kissed, got wild, and got a life. The book was sold. It was a story of a young girl like herself. The book was sold for $50,000. It very quickly was soared to the top of the New York bestseller list. And Kavya became an overnight sensation. The book was published by Little Brown and Company, very well-known publisher. Unfortunately, 2 weeks after the book was published, it was found that large chunks of the book were plagiarized. There were very many sections of the book were plagiarized of another American author, Megan McCafferty. The book was pulled. It had to be pulped. It was a scandal. So she says that she was not aware and that people had helped her to write the book. So this is just the voice of caution to all of you, that when you write, if you get help from interns or from friends, make sure that you know the source from which you are getting it. In case you use somebody else's work, please give them credit. If you are writing a fiction or a poem, you cannot use anyone else's work. You can only use someone else's work if it is an academic paper, non-commercial. Now, I'm going to take a little break, and then I'm going to give you a writing assignment. It's a short writing assignment, but I hope it's just 2 sentences, but I hope that all of you will join me. So are you ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. So I want all of you to write on a paper, my name is, and write your name. And then I want you to write, I am, and then put a blank. I want you to complete that sentence in not more than 5 words. Not more than 5 words. Now this is, I'm not giving you any suggestions. Interpret it the way you like. Your name and I am. And as and when you are ready, maybe you can, I don't know which way it would be better, whether you would like to feed it in the chat or whether you would like to talk about it. I have no idea what your staff think would work, but.
And they can post it on the chat box.
Okay. So you understood what you have to do. Your name and I am, not more than 5 words. Okay. Are we nearly done? Very nice.
The chat box is filled with replies,
Yes,
ma'am. I think they're still writing.
Yeah, okay. No, take your time. We can have them a few minutes more.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you see how varied the replies are? And,
Yes, ma'am.
and not only that, how each one has interpreted in a different way. This is just to show you what is the power of words. How just one sentence can change Each one is trying to tell their story in that short, I am an eternal, I have noted down some of the, answers. And I think that this is to show you the power of communication. In this short time, in that one sentence, they tell me so much about themselves and the way they want to be seen and the way, what is important to them, what is paramount. I don't want to be boxed. Each one is, so this is what I wanted to, this exercise I did so that you may understand the power of communication. Just one sentence. There are no two people who have answered in the same way. Each one is interpreting it in their own way. Are we done nearly?
I think so. You can continue.
Yeah. So, what did you learn from this exercise? This was just because it's just an online workshop, but each one of you in one sentence, there was no two answers that were the same. And some of them revealed so much of thinking, so much of perception, and so much of a desire to project themselves and awareness of their own mind. So the answers were so varied. I am a liberated soul. I am an overthinker. I am trapped. I am brave. I am a learner. I am human. I am chaos. I am an eco-freak. I am a curious person. I am lost. I am a fraction of my subconscious mind. So what I could make out from here is that this is a class of, what can I say, people who are born to be writers, because you are also imaginative. So quickly you perceive the way to use words. So I hope that all of you will, think about what I have said. Writing is an excellent, nowadays people have got more than one career. They have one career which is bringing them the bread and the butter. And then they have something else which is their passion, which they do for their enjoyment, for their entertainment, maybe to bring a little jam as well to the table. So I hope that all of you would also think of developing writing as an alternative profession, and or making it a skill, which is something that you can leverage to get ahead in your main profession. But either way, I think this is going to be a skill that is invaluable. The way you project yourself and the way you tell your story. Now I'm going to talk about something which all people should know, whether you are a writer or not. What is copyright and what is public domain? Do any of you know what is meant by public domain? I think you may not. So now I'm assuming that you don't have much knowledge. So I'm going to tell you. Now, when you write a story, for example, now say one of you write a story, that story is yours, intellectual property. It means it belongs to you. And nobody, and you get it published somewhere, maybe in a book. Even if it is published, the story belongs to you. You are the owner of the story. And it continues to be your story till 60 years after you die. After you die, 60 years after you die, it comes into public domain, which means that anybody can use it. Which is why the stories of William Shakespeare, Rabindranath Tagore, the Jataka tales, the Bhagavad Gita, the Puranas, Alice in Wonderland, all these stories are in public domain because the authors have been dead. In some cases for centuries, but in all cases for more than 70 years. Now, what happens now? R.K. Narayan, you must have read about R.K. Narayan's book Swami and Friends, Malgudi Days. Incidentally, Malgudi, he also wrote it based on a small town in Mysore where he grew up. It was autobiographical. He lived with his grandmother. So the grandmother has a big role to play in his books. He has not been dead for 60 years. So his book is still not in public domain, none of his books. So if you want to use his book, then you have to write to, even though he is dead, his estate, to the heirs. When you write up, you leave it to your heirs or whoever, the lawyers or whoever. And in case you want to publish it, you have to pay a small fee. And that is how you get the permission. So if you write a book, which is a bestseller, which does very well, it earns money even long after you die. For 60 years after you die. If it becomes a movie, then it earns movie rights. And many people do not know, but most of Walt Disney's movies were all public domain books. They did that so that they won't have to pay any fees. For example, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was written by the brothers Grimm's brothers. In the Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the original version, there were 7 dwarfs. They didn't have any names. But when Walt Disney made the movie, he made them sleepy, dopey, happy. And I remember and this was of course a marketing gimmick, because small children then wanted to buy all the 7 dwarfs. There were toys, you know. And now the Walt Disney version of Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs is not in public domain. It is copyrighted. You cannot use Dopey or Happy or any of the dwarfs without taking permission from Snow White and from the Walt Disney Company. But supposing you decide that you're going to write an Indian version of Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs, and you take the public domain story and you write it in an Indian way, or you give the dwarfs a separate character, that version belongs to you. It doesn't belong to Disney. It doesn't belong to Grimm. It belongs to you. So this is an important thing that you should know about copyright. Now, when you are looking on the internet, if you want to reproduce a poem, if you want to put it in a book, you have to look for things which are in public domain. You cannot use things which belong to someone else without getting permission and paying a fees. But whatever is in the public domain, you do not have to pay any fees. It is free for everyone to use. So remember that when you write something also, if you write an article for a magazine or for a newspaper, usually the newspaper publishes it, but they do not get the copyright. It's still yours. It belongs to you, and you can get it published if you wish later on at some other time. That is what is meant by public domain, free for you. Similarly, illustrations, like very famous, books which are being published right now, any book that was published before 1923 in the United States is in the public domain. The illustrations are also in the public domain. So you can use those illustrations if you so wish. But books which are published after 1978, they are protected by copyright. Now, there are some examples which are exceptions. You must have read the book Peter Pan. It was J.M. Barrie's story of a boy who never grows up. He's a fairy. So J.M. Barrie gave all the royalties to a hospital in London. So the Peter Pan will never go into public domain. All the money that is earned from the book and from the movie and will go to the hospital to look after sick children. There is also another kind of copyright called Creative Commons license, which is now modern, which is a modern thing, which is you write your work so that it is free for everybody to use. I have also written some stories on the Creative Commons license. There is a children's website called Pratham, which uses only Creative Commons license. You don't have to ask anybody permission to take any of those stories. So when you are writing, be aware about your rights and privileges too. That as a writer, it belongs to you. You have to decide if you are going to give it free, then that is your wish. But if you do not, the copyright belongs to you and you can earn a lot of money from that. I have already covered what is plagiarism. And I told you that is a very important thing about plagiarizing. Please be always aware that you should not take anything from the internet that doesn't belong to you. If you have a doubt, run it through a plagiarism checker. There are online plagiarism checkers. Even when we are judging, if I find something like a 10-year-old has written it, and I feel that, oh, this 10-year-old could not have probably written it, then I run it through a plagiarism checker and then find out whether it belongs to somebody else. A few events from my own writing career. It's all writers to some extent are teachers. And I remember there was this, I feel that writing is a great way to teach gender equality, to teach children to be sensitive, and to teach them to be secular and to be democratic. When I teach slightly older children, I always tell them there are two things that I advise people to keep away from. One is religion and the other is politics. I believe that religion is a very personal thing. Each one has got their own faith and their own belief. And we are very fortunate that we are living in a democracy. So we are all allowed to worship as we wish. We can follow the professions that we wish, but that is our free choice. So more wars and quarrels have been wrought in the world by fighting over religion than anything else. So we have lots of other things to comment on. So let's just stay away from, inflammatory remarks. Even our own faith, it is best that we don't comment upon it. We are free to practice as we wish, whichever religion we like. But we need not expound about it to others or try to convince them that it is better or worse or equal to any other faith. The second thing is, do not comment on politics. Practically, because there are no, every day they are in bed with someone else, the political group. So there are no friends, there are no enemies, there are no allies. If you are writing, stay away from writing on religion and politics. Because I honestly believe that there are many other things to write about rather than these two. And this is my advice, especially now, we have many more channels for communication, but they are also minutely viewed. So be aware that whatever you speak about, whatever you post, you cannot remove it from the internet. Be careful, judicious in your words and in the way you express yourself. That is my advice to everyone. About gender sensitivity, I would like to give you a little, it really happened. I used to take a creative writing workshop for children, small children, and one of the assignments that I gave them is, these were about 8 or 9-year-olds. Write about yourself when you are 65. Now, when you are 65 is a very, very long way away. I understood that they couldn't really, imagine what it was like. So then one child put up her hand and said, I have a grandmother who's at home, who is very old. And then I said, okay, would you like to talk about her? So one of the things she said is that my grandmother doesn't have any teeth, so she can't eat. And we have to feed her liquids. So everyone was listening. So in the essays that came, everybody says, when I am 65, I will have all my teeth. So that was interesting. Then one boy said, when I am 65, I will have 5 grandsons. So then I asked him, like, only grandsons, no granddaughters? And he said, no. And I said, why? Very clear. because boys are better than girls. Then, so there was silence in the class, and there was in the front row, there were some girls. He was a very nice boy, and there were some girls whom he was very friendly with, and he used to talk a lot to them. So I pointed to them and said, so you think that you are better than them? Then he was quiet, and then he didn't say anything. Then I just explained to him, gave a little talk in the simplest way that I could, that, you know, boys and girls are equal, and the world would not be the same if we don't treat. So there was, but I was demoralized, I must tell you. And when I came home that day, I told my, family that what can I teach them when there is so much, stacked against, centuries of prejudice. But anyway, I left it. 3 weeks later, we had another workshop, and that day the exercise was, if you were a stone, what kind of stone would you be? And then we have a little brainstorming before, and I said, like, you can be a piece of stone from a volcano, you can be a brick, you can be a diamond, you can be an emerald, you can be any kind of stone. So then the children started asking me, can I be a pebble? Can I be this? So they had lots of ideas. And then I said, any questions before you start writing? And then the grandfather of 5 grandsons put up his hand. And then I said, yes, so you have a question? And I said, yes. And he said, ma'am, can my stone be a girl? And for me, I couldn't even speak. And for me, that was a great victory. And then I realized the power of words. When I was talking to him, it was expressionless, and I did not refer to it ever again. But 3 weeks later, he had obviously internalized, and he wanted to make his stone a female. So this is just some examples that I have of the power of expression. Words can change the world. So I want all of you to know that, as Mr. Bhagat told you yesterday, nothing in the world is fixed, but your mind is magical. So you can shape it the way you like. Read everything that you can get. Ray Bradbury has written the Zen of writing. He said everybody should read a poem, an essay, and a chapter of a book. That is not possible. Read everything that you can get. And I say, don't read only things that everybody recommends. You can even read books which are not highly recommended. How will you know a good book unless you read a bad book? Read whatever you can get. And a good writer is a good reader. And it is the more you read, the more you expand your mind, and the freer you become. When you are communicating, try to avoid using Indianisms. Now, we are like that only, please, so we are very, if you go to the internet, you will find hundreds of Indianisms. And, Shashi Tharoor has said that he invented the word prepone. Actually, there is no word as prepone. It is the opposite. We use it as the opposite of postpone, but there is really no such word. So try to avoid using too many Indianisms. One expression which actually irritates me is when somebody asks, if you go for a movie, or you read a book, or you had a nice meal, how was it? It was too good. There, it cannot be too good. It can be excellent, it can be outstanding, but too good together is grammatically wrong. That is one of the, it's one, when you want to say that, use a superlative, we have this habit of saying too good. That is a wrong. So try to avoid using punctuation. My children make fun of me and say that I'm the only one who looks for semicolons on my mobile phone, which is in a way true. But punctuation is actually very important. It can change the meaning of a sentence. it can change the whole story. Now I'm going to read you a little excerpt about punctuation. Just one moment. So this was in 1962. NASA launched a spacecraft which was supposed to fly past the planet Venus. 5 minutes after liftoff, it was aborted. And the reason was because the person who was doing the coding put a hyphen in the wrong place. It costs $18.5 million. And they said it was the costliest hyphen in history. So be aware of when you are using punctuation. A prisoner once lost his life because of a comma. The message sent to the jail was, hang him, not leave him. But actually the message was, hang him not, comma, leave him. The comma was placed in the wrong place. And so he lost his life. So punctuation is very, very important. Take care that you punctuate your sentences. And to some extent, I blame this on WhatsApp and on SMS. It took me many years to decipher the WhatsApp language because the alphabets are used for whole words like U for YOU and R for ARE. So unfortunately, we have got so used to WhatsApp communication and short forms for full words that when we write also, we start using WhatsApp language and abbreviations. And we don't even realize that it is grammatically incorrect and it spoils the writing. I have had essays to be judged, competitions. When I go to judge competitions, entries that are given with WhatsApp language. Please do not do that. The other thing I want to say is to be a good writer, you have to be a good editor and re-edit your own work. Read it 2-3 times. If you really are interested in writing, you should join a writer's class or a critic group where people will read your work and they will critique it and they will tell you where it can be improved. No writer writes a first draft that is perfect, but you need to critique it, get it perfected. J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter books were rejected umpteen times. One good thing about being a writer is that you develop a thick skin because you are rejected so many times. So which is a good learning for life lessons. So learn how to look at your own work from a critical point of view and accept criticism when it is given to you. And they say, the story is nice, but maybe you could change it. Sometimes editors tell you, we like the basic idea, but we want you to change everything. We want you to change the plot. We want you to change the character. You have to be ready to do that. Spelling is of paramount importance. As I told you once again, because of WhatsApp language, the word potato once lost George Bush the presidential election. They had gone on it was a presidential campaign during the campaigning, and Dan Quayle was the vice president of George Bush Senior. They went to a school and they asked a little boy, it was during the spelling bee time, to spell potato. So he spelled it correctly, but Dan Quayle said, no, you add an E to the end, P-O-T-A-T-O-E. And unfortunately, it was a potato that lost the presidency because it was put everywhere. Even today, if you Google it, you will still find it. This was in 1992. And of course, all of you will be remembering Donald Trump and his Twitter accounts, which was riddled with spelling mistakes. And I remember once he was meeting Prince Charles, Prince of Wales, and he spelled Wales as W-H-A-L-E-S, and Twitter was full of beluga whales with crowns on their heads. So when you are in a position of such authority, people are going to look at everything that you write and that you read. So especially when you express yourself through communication, you cannot afford to make such glaring spelling mistakes. So Donald Trump said, our country has been divided for decades. We need to protest in order to heal. And he spelled heal as H-E-E-L. So there were pictures of people's legs with heels. So spelling, and especially now, when you are a public persona or somebody people watch, they read what you write on your Twitter account, on your Instagram account, on your Facebook account. It is all the more difficult because there are automatic spell checks that make mistakes that you may not have made also. So that's another thing. Before you send anything, look at each word, because you have typed it correctly, but when it comes, it is a wrong spelling. Luckily, we did not have all those. We had to depend only on our own brain. Technology sometimes brings disadvantages too. So this is one. The other thing is, when you write an email, there are a few things which I would like you to remember. The most important thing is to write a subject. When you get hundreds of emails, if you just write reply to what? Write clearly with capital letters the subject of your email. Do not start greetings with hi or yo or howdy, and put at the end, put a signature block which has your name, your designation, and your phone number, which is much easier. Then you will probably get a reply, especially if you are writing for a job, for an internship, for somebody whom you want to make sure is reading your email. Make sure that you do all this. Stick to black and stick to Calibri, Arial, or Times New Roman 12 to 14. Do not try Comic Sans relief in purple. That's not going to get you anywhere. They may not even read your email. It will be immediately clicked and put, or it will go into the spam box. So for all methods of communication, you have to be aware of the rules and be careful. Now I will break for a few questions, if there are any, on writing, about anything else that I have spoken about.
Yes, participants, do you have any questions, any queries? You can raise your hand or you can write in a chat box.
Yeah, they can do either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, Sana has raised her hand. Yes, Sana, go ahead.
Good evening, ma'am. I have a question.
Yes.
I always fear, like, whenever in future, if I write a book,
Yes.
and if I'll take my book to a publisher, I fear that they'll steal my work or something. So, are there any protocols for that? Like, how I have to put my work together?
Yes. This is definitely this is a relevant question, and so what you are basically saying is, you're talking about, you have written a book, the copyright belongs to you, and the protocols is, when you send your book to a publisher, do not send the entire book at one time. For example, if you have written a book of say 10 chapters, choose a good reputed publisher, send a query letter, and send only 2 chapters first with a little about yourself. Once they like the 2 chapters and you have some correspondence with them, then you will send the remaining 10 chapters to them. I mean, the remaining 8 chapters to them. Having said that, I must tell you that it is very common for ideas to be stolen. It is common. Like, you pitch an idea to a good publisher, and you don't know the publisher, and they all have their own favorites. They may take the idea and give it to their own author, favorite author, and tell them that, oh, you write it. So that risk is definitely there, you know. So the other thing you can do is you can self-publish yourself, which is now becoming very popular. So you can publish your own work yourself. So then there is no danger of anybody stealing your work. You have to spend some money, but if your book does well, you will earn the money back through royalties. So these are the two options that you can.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
You're welcome. Yeah. Yeah, there were some other questions. Don't write about politics and religion or any controversy, but yes, the question, the end of the question. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, there are a few questions in the chat box. And the first question that I can see here, Dr. Ishrat has asked, requesting you to please repeat about the costliest hyphen in history. So, ma'am, if you could go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to I'll just read it out to you. Yeah.
Sure, ma'am.
Yeah. A misspelled word in a tweet is usually a trivial matter, but a mistake by US Space Station NASA was of a different order. On July 22nd, 1962, NASA launched Mariner 1, an American spacecraft designed for a fly past of the planet Venus. 5 minutes after liftoff, Mariner aborted and the whole craft was destroyed. It was built at a cost of $18.5 million, but there was a computer coding error and there was one missing hyphen. Because of that, this was the costliest hyphen in history. Yeah, I hope that that was clear, ma'am. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am, I think.
Yes, ma'am, it was pretty clear. I think ma'am also is pretty satisfied with the answer.
Okay.
Yes.
The next.
Yes, ma'am, there are quite a few questions.
Yeah.
So Manisha has asked, ma'am, what are the tips for becoming a good essayist?
Yeah. So I think, you know, for any writing, I think the important thing is not to copy anyone, but to bring yourself into the essay. For example, if you have to write an essay on Diwali, do not write about something that you have read and you are impressed with, but write about your own self. How do you celebrate Diwali in your house? What are the traditions and the of your own family? What is it that you like about it? Bring yourself into it. That way, your essay is unique. It cannot be copied by anyone else. There will be no two that are the same. Like, for example, the exercise I gave you, there were no two that were the same. You could clearly see the perception, how different people perceived themselves in a different way. So to be an essayist, for any other form of writing, do not think that the more you write, the better. I remember once I judged a poetry competition and the first prize went to a child who wrote a poem of 4 lines. But those 4 lines were so beautifully written that, you know, they captured my imagination. But, you know, some parents came to quarrel with me and then they told me that my child wrote 25 lines. How did you give a prize to the person who wrote 4 lines? So I just want to tell you, if you write 5 pages, it doesn't mean your work is better than one who writes 1 page. That 1 page should be insightful, it should be imaginative, it should be interesting, it should be engaging. So length is nothing. And if you are joining writing competitions, please be aware that there is a word limit. For example, if they say write in 2000 words, you can write 1999 words. But if you exceed and write 2005 words, you are disqualified. So follow the rules. And if you are not writing for a competition, do not try to pad up the paper. You know, when during examination, they wrote 5 pages, they are going to get more marks than me. No, because they wrote 5 pages doesn't mean that they are going to get more marks. 1 page of relevant material is more useful than 5 pages of rambling. Yes.
Absolutely, ma'am.
Yeah.
I think someone here had raised their hand.
Yes, yes.
Saima.
Zaiba, yes.
Yes.
Zaiba, you can ask your question.
Yes.
Ayushi is here. Yes, Ayushi.
Ayushi, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask that if I'm going through some sort of a creativity block, or if I can't write, there's some problem. There are times when I can't write because I feel like what I'm writing is not so good. I could write better. I could use better vocabulary. So I just can't write for a very long time because of this issue. So is there anything that you would advise me?
Yeah, welcome to the writer's world. We all go through this, so you are not alone. And there are times when we just cannot write, and all what we write, we ourselves realize is just not up to the mark, or the way that we see it in our head and what is coming on the paper are two different things. The way that I saw the story when I was imagining it is not the way that it comes in the paper. So, but I would say keep writing. The only way that you can improve your writing is by writing more. If you write something and you are not satisfied with it, keep it aside. That's what I do. I keep it aside for some days. Many times when you look at the same thing again and again, you are so saturated that you cannot see the mistakes. Keep it aside for 10 days and start writing something else. After 10 days, when it has faded from your mind and you read it again, all the mistakes are going to jump out at you. And you will be able to make it better your own self. But don't get discouraged that, oh, you know, something has happened to me. I don't think I'll ever be a writer. You are definitely going to be a writer because you are going through all the things that ordinary writers go through. Writer's block is part of our territory.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
Now Nisha has raised her hand. Yes, Nisha.
Hello, ma'am.
Hello. Yes.
Ma'am, any opinion on short stories, ma'am?
Yes. Have you written any short stories, or are you interested in writing short stories?
Ma'am, I'm interested in writing short stories.
Have you written any short stories?
Not yet, ma'am.
Yet. Okay, so if you go on to the Instagram, there are very many companies now where they have many competitions for people who are writing short stories. It's an open competition, and your short story is selected and you win a prize. It comes in a book, in an anthology. So I would encourage you to write a few short stories and send it out. Send it for competitions and see how it does. There will be some rules, of course. They'll say not so more than 3,000 words, not more than 2,000 words. Sometimes there will be a topic and you will have to write on a particular topic, but which is a good thing, because when you have a topic, then your ideas are channelized in one particular way. You can also write for magazines and newspapers, but I would suggest that writing for a competition is a more disciplined way of doing it, because there's a last date. There are some fixed rules and regulations. Practice writing at home and show it, have a critic group, show it to members of your family, show it to 1 or 2 people who are not connected with you, who will give you a very honest opinion. See, when we show our friends and our family members, they tend to be a little biased, and they will give you, opinion that, oh, it's wonderful, even if it can be made better. So get a critic, a writer friend, or somebody who knows to give you an honest opinion. When you are a writer, remember, if they criticize your story, they are not criticizing you. It has nothing to do with you as a person. It is they are looking at your creation as a work of art. So do not take it personally that, oh, they didn't like my story, they don't like me. It has nothing to do with you. It is only your story.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
If anyone wants me to critique their work, I have an author page on Facebook. I have a website, and I have a poetry page on Instagram where I write original poems for children, and it has been picked up by another website in the United States. You can get in touch with me through any of these ways. I will be glad to critique your work.
That's great, ma'am.
Yes.
You can put down your handles in the chat box maybe, and then
yes, I will. Yeah, I'll put down all the handles in the chat box so that, you know, they can, you know, whoever is interested can share. Oh, and I'm seeing, yeah. So can I just look at some of the questions? How to
yes, ma'am.
Yeah, how to handle the grammatical mistakes while writing poems. So one thing about poetry is that you don't have to be so careful about grammar as you have to be when you write a story. Like some poetic license is allowed, but even so, you know, there are some words that you cannot, like plurals and, you know, tenses. So I would suggest the best thing, there is a tool that I use when writing a poetry, and which shows the reading ease. Try to avoid using passive sentences, use more active sentences. So I can give you the name if you write to me about the tool, which once you write your first draft, then when you do the correction, it will point out all the grammatical mistakes, and then you can change that. So I will give you the name of that tool. How to deal with the negative feedbacks of the people reading our stuff is usually they bash on our writing. Whenever I wrote, who praise. Yeah, so this, I think I've already answered this. When you are a writer or any public person, everybody is not going to like you. So we have to accept that. If you are an ordinary citizen, it is much easier. Everybody doesn't love the prime minister. Everybody does not love the president. Everybody has strong views, but you still do your work anyway. And remember, if they are criticizing your story, it is not a criticism of you. It is a criticism of that essay or that poem. Now I must tell you, I am a children's book writer, and children are the most difficult critics. When I buy a book, like, you know, somebody recommends a book and said it's a lovely book, and maybe I pay 700 rupees, when I start reading, so boring. But then I paid 700 and my friends have said that it's a good book, so I determinedly continue to read. But children are not like that. First sentence, they'll say such a boring book and throw it aside. And then no matter what, they will not read it again. So children are very harsh critics. And, you know, in a way, we develop a thick skin. Did you like the story? No, I thought it was such a boring story, I fell asleep. So notice the things with children when I read a story is when they say, oh, we want to go to the toilet. That means that they are very bored and they want to make a trip out of the room to go, and the only place they can go is to the toilet. So when 2 or 3 people say, oh, we also want to go to the toilet, I know I have lost the audience. Do not take anything personally. Negative feedback, develop a thick skin. And for any profession in future, if you are overly sensitive, you are going to be in trouble. Be thick skin and just plunge on. Continue with your work. Do not get upset or nervous. How can we be specific and concise while writing a large amount of literature in communicating with others in a creative form? Yeah, so the same rules apply. A large amount, I would suggest that you write small chunks. Don't try to attempt a large amount at one time. You are writing a big book, divide it into 10 chapters and do 1 chapter at a time, and correct each chapter 1 chapter at a time. so that it will be easier for you. It's like, you know, eating a sandwich, instead of stuffing the whole sandwich into your mouth, you take small bites. So divide the same way your work. So one chapter you write, then you go over it, see if you're satisfied, then you go into the next chapter. Give tips for freelancing. Well, freelancing is self-publishing platforms. Yeah, Notion Press is very good. You can try Notion Press. There is this website on Instagram called WriteFluence, where I have written 1 or 2 stories. They have competitions. You can try writing for them. Creative writing, they have poetry and they have short stories. Good self-publishing. Yeah, self-publishing, there are many. If you are interested in writing for children, you can go to this website called Story Weaver, Pratham Story Weaver. You can make a picture book for children. There are illustrations also that you can put together. It's a very interesting website. There are thousands of books made by people from all over the world. There are translations also. For example, if you are good in a particular vernacular language, say Marathi or Bengali, you can translate an English book into Marathi or in Bengali. The translation becomes your property. That's another thing that I want to tell you. If you translate a book from a vernacular language, in the translation, it will not be exactly the same. There will be some variation. So that translated becomes your property. You own the copyright of that. Reading is as cathartic as writing. Absolutely. I completely agree with that. When you are in a bad mood, or supposing something terrible happens to you, when you read about others who have had the same experience and you find how they have coped with it, you feel a lot better and you feel stronger and you feel that you can also cope with it. Like, this is why I was so much impressed by Vidhi Mukherjee's story, because it was a very hard thing for an 18-year-old girl to go through. She did not ask for it, but to have the courage to come out of that and to write something which was so insightful, at the same time so searing, was truly remarkable. There are some more messages, some more. Can I just read? How to approach for a book launch in future if we want to do. So the first thing is you have to write the book. If the book does very well, and if the publisher is happy, then there's an automatic launch. If the book is something which they feel is something that will be interesting to the published. Most publishers, they have a launch when it is a book, whether it's a children's book, a poetry book. Unfortunately, during the COVID time, most of the bookshops have been closed. Airports were one of the big areas where people used to buy books because of the travel. Now, unfortunately, that has also closed. So publishing is now at a slight lull. There is a low. But since we seem to be coming out of this COVID crisis, I think there is hope that maybe within the next 6 to 8 months, to make up for what we have lost, there will be a flurry of publishing. So I hope some of you may also try your luck. Is there anything else, that any other questions? I think I've answered almost all that are in the chat box.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Participant, do you have any more queries?
Yeah, any more queries? Oh wait, I think I'm going to put my I'm going to put my email address.
Yes.
Okay, that's my email address. Then I'm going to give you my author page on Facebook. So this Lottle Kids Poetry is my That's my poetry page on Instagram. This is my website. I have a website. You can read some of my work and you can send me, I mean, it's better, I think, because I don't check that often, but if you email me, definitely, I am very ready to critique your work. I can give you suggestions where you can get things published. If you are interested in writing poetry or in writing essays, self-publishing. I have never self-published, but many self-publishers are in touch with me, so I can give you connections to them. Email ID is not visible. It's not visible. The email ID is not visible.
No, ma'am. We can't see what you have shared. Yeah.
Let me see. Can you see it now?
Ma'am, I think you've sent it as a direct message to someone.
Oh, okay. So I have to remove that now, right?
Yes, you'll have to send it to everyone. There's a small arrow beside. Just select to everyone and then everybody else will be able to see.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, I didn't see that.
No problem.
Is it come now or no? It's still coming only to that one person. I think I've sent it to Sana Azmi. Can she please?
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Sana, if you could do it.
Yeah, okay. I've sent it to Sana, so I think she will share it.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah. So I think the rest, yeah, if you email me, then I will give you whatever else details you require.
Yes, ma'am. We have got your email ID.
Yeah, email ID, and yeah, if there's anything else, you can just email me. Yeah, is there anything else that anyone wants to know?
No, ma'am. I think all are done with their questions and yes, ma'am.
So an announcement for the participants that the feedback link will be posted at the end of this session. We will now conclude this session with a vote of thanks. For this, I request Professor H.R.College. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Roshni, and on behalf of H.R.College and SIWS College, Santhini ma'am, a heartfelt thank you to you for touching upon a topic which is very neglected, especially because we are teaching in commerce colleges, and you know, these students are really not used to the concept of writing.
Yes.
And as you have rightly, I was very happy that you have touched upon this point that language is shrinking because of SMS and WhatsApp, and you know, we see the same kind of expressions even in their answer sheets, and students have just forgotten the difference between formal expression of the language vis-a-vis you know, spoken day-to-day communication. So I'm very happy that you brought in those aspects. Also, you touched upon aspects of copyright and public domain, IPR. This is also something that is very unknown, especially to commerce students. I mean, not completely unknown, but they are not so much into writing, you know. Yes. So I'm very happy, ma'am, that you brought in these points and that you have, I think this was a great, you know, experience for all of them, and we all feel motivated and encouraged to write, even to be able to write a page about yourself. And I do this exercise in my tutorial classes where I give them guidelines and I ask students to write an essay about themselves. And they find it to be so difficult because they've never given a thought as to what you want to say about yourself. How are you going to put it into a formal expression? So thank you, ma'am, for bringing in all those points. And as a researcher myself, one important point which you brought about, especially in India, we hesitate in sharing our research, our writing. We do not want to share it with people and say that, see, this is what I have written and can you give me a feedback on this? Rather, we are very secretive about it. We feel that, someone else is going to take my ideas and, publish it before I do it. And somehow people are just very hesitant in coming out in the open and saying that this is what I have written and if you could give me a feedback about it. So thank you so much, ma'am, for your time and effort. And this was just a wonderful, wonderful session. And
to me and lending me your ears. I hope that you found it interesting.
Yes, absolutely.
The life lessons, I hope. And, I hope to see so many, they are young and imaginative, very talented. So I hope that they will, listen to all this and we will see an explosion of talent.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, ma'am, for being with us.
It was a pleasure to meet all of you. And thank you once again for inviting me. It was invigorating to hear the questions and the answers. It was wonderful.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think the session was very enlightening.
Yeah. I would like to, in case I could have the photograph, I would be happy.
Sure.
Whenever you can send it to me, I would be grateful.
Sure, ma'am. We'll do that.
Thank you so much.
So participants, the feedback link will be posted in the chat box. Please ensure that it has been posted. Please ensure that you fill the feedback link before you leave the meeting.
So tomorrow's session also I will attend, and
Sure, ma'am, most welcome.
Definitely, ma'am.
So it was a wonderful idea to, have this kind of a workshop. Congratulations to the organizers. It's so different from their usual studies, but I think it makes their mind so fresh.
Absolutely. And yes, I must mention, thank you, Roshni. You have conducted this session very well. Thank you, Team PSDS, for all the support.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
I think participants can fill the feedback form. Santhini, ma'am.
Yes, can I leave the meeting?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Sure.
Have a great evening. Have a great evening, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Take care, ma'am. Thank you
so much. Good day. Have a good evening. Bye.
Have a great evening.
Bye-bye. So participants, once you all fill the feedback link, you can leave the meeting.
Geeta, just like yesterday, do we need to?
Yes, let's do that. We will have a meeting with the core committee for 10 minutes
tomorrow
after the session.
Hello, ma'am.
Thank you. Ma'am, you're on mute.
I can't see the link. Oh, now I got it. Thanks. Fantastic session. I'm thoroughly enjoying it. It's an intellectual picnic.
Thank you so
ma'am.
much, ma'am.
Yeah, you've been with us yesterday, today, and hope to see you tomorrow as well. It's very encouraging that you're there in the session.
Ishrat ma'am, you're familiar with Santhini ma'am. You're familiar with Sucharita. They are connected to your college.
And I think it was your essay that she corrected.
Yes. It was a coincidence. I'm like, I came to know about it much later, and Sucharita is also here tomorrow. So that's how it is, you know. And
the group. The feedback.
okay, so I think we'll break for today, Geeta, and then join. Yeah, after.
Yeah. Brianna, if you could just tell us when to join on the group, we'll join immediately.
Sure, ma'am. I think in the next 5 minutes again, you can join.
Sure.
I'm sorry, I missed the link again. Please, will someone just put it up for a minute?
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah, post it in the chat box again, please.
Found it. Thanks.
Ma'am, you found it? Great.
Yeah. So much.
You're welcome, ma'am.